DJ Flo.
We are live, and we are live. Hey, welcome everyone to our Sunday brunch. We have a special guest with us today, Steve Bray. You probably know his face online, and of course we have my co-host, wonderful co-host, Political X, and we have Big Maj along with us as well to help us out. I hope everyone can hear us fine. I think the audio is good. So. Remember, guys, to hit us with a super chat if you'd like to get us to read out your comment. Valerio, thank you so much, Valerio Tarantino. Morning to everyone. Morning to you too. We're going to start off with Steve. He can tell us a bit about what's going on. And we'll, of course, talk about the cost of living crisis, Ukraine, and maybe we'll be able to fit in the elections that are just around the corner. Thanks so much, Steve, for coming on. Can you tell us just a little bit about what's about the protests that are taking place at the moment, and maybe some of the I doubt there's anyone who doesn't know you, but if there's maybe just a little bit about why you got into this protesting. When did you begin, actually? Because you've been doing it for a long time.
Yeah, I actually began at the beginning of 2017. I mean, initially it was all arguing online, and I thought, I can't handle this. Need to get out because we'd become a bit of a bubble online. So I wanted people to see that there was actually a protest against what was going on. We can all type away and say things online. But nothing actually beats being out there and sticking it to these MPs.
Feel free to. You can use whatever language you want.
Yeah.
Free speech.
Yeah. Giving hell to these politicians that are giving us hell. So I formed the group Sodom, Standard Defiance European Movement, and from the 5th of September 2017, for 2 years, every day Parliament was sitting, we were there protesting. For the first 2 years, which was hard going because some days was like 6 in the morning till 11 at night, because we were focused on also getting the media to make sure that people knew there were protests going on. And it was tough, but for 2 years non-stop doing that. But what we're going through now is a result of Brexit, a corrupt government. So the picture has become far bigger. Although Brexit is massive, the picture has become far bigger. It's our democracy which is under attack. We have the likes of Priti Patel, Rees-Mogg, who hasn't got a clue. And then when you look at where their money is coming from, you look at party donations to the Tories. I think since 2015, they've had over £22 million from Russian donors. And when I ask them about this, they get very evasive, quite aggressive sometimes. They don't like to be challenged.
If there's nothing to hide, then why would they be aggressive? That's the thing.
Exactly. They try and turn it on me and they ask, well, who's funding you? Who pays you? And I'm open about it. I have a crowdfunder. I'm self-employed. And, basically, it's the Remain movement that is keeping us there and keeping us going. And the more they support us, the more we can do.
Can I ask, Steve, what was your most memorable moment during the protesting over the last number of years?
Well, the good moment was when Anna Soubry came over on my 50th birthday and sung Happy Birthday. I think the best moments from all of this, I think everyone can say this, the people we've met, the friends we've made, and believe it or not, before all this, I was not that political. I just vote for whoever I thought could do the best. But when you actually look at it and you look back and you think, a lot of these people have been lying and misleading this country for decades. And only, I'm not extremist, but I am looking at it a lot deeper than I used to. And it's what we're going through is to me, it's borderline becoming a fascist state.
There's definitely some suggestion towards that. I mean, we get an election every 4 years, and from what I can see, they can do whatever they want. There's not much. I mean, there are committee meetings that can hold them to account. You've got the oppositions that can say what they want in Parliament. That's about it. I mean, I'm not sort of particularly enamoured with the committee meetings being a decent check, or the Lords.
Yeah. It's all based on trust and honour, our system. There is no kind of written constitution to account for when you have somebody who's corrupt, somebody who will lie day in, day out. He doesn't have the integrity to resign. Most prime ministers would have gone, he should have been gone within weeks of being prime minister.
Yeah.
He is surviving everything because our system is based on honour and trust, and there's no way of sacking him.
He should have gone from the Russia report.
Yeah.
That alone should have been enough, because he said twice in the campaign in November, there's no Russian interference that I've seen. And he's had the report from October. So from October to November, he had the report. He gave off the impression to the public there was no interference and that he'd read the report. And then we find there's interference. I mean, to me, that's almost a case of treason. I mean, I don't know what anyone else thinks of that, but it sounds outrageous to say it. But at the same time, I'm like, that's what it is. I can't see any other way of doing it. If you've lied to the public on that level, that's a form of treason in order to get elected.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts, Steve?
They've betrayed the British people, you know, and it's also our friends, our close neighbours, the European Union. The impact of Brexit has reverberated around the world, but it's going to affect us most ultimately. And, you know, so far I believe it's cost in excess of £280 billion. And ultimately, we are the ones that will pay this price in our taxes.
Yeah, it's, you know, the Jacob Rees-Moggs, Boris Johnson, Nigel Farage, they'll be fine. They'll be protected financially from the impact of Brexit. It's the ordinary people. You know, Jacob Rees-Mogg, you know, back in 2019, I think it was talking about how, you know, we can leave with a no-deal Brexit and food will be cheaper, shoes will be cheaper. And I did a video on that where, you know, he's talking about, you know, shoes will be cheaper. And this week there was an interview with an importer for shoes, and she said we've had to add an extra 20-30 pounds per pair, and it's not sustainable. So this is going to be, of course, either the companies go bust or they pass it on to the consumer. And
I think that was in the report. Clothing and shoes have gone up, which is, I mean,
it's not something you can. It's not a luxury. Clothing and shoes are not a luxury. Unless, sorry, Steve, go ahead.
A little story now you mentioned Rees-Mogg. There was a documentary on one day where Channel 4 documentary, and they said he'd made £7 million from the Brexit vote. So the next day, I'm actually walking towards him as I'm in Westminster, and we're going to pass each other. And we just stopped briefly. I said, "Hey, Mr. Rees-Mogg, I saw a documentary last night. You made £7 million from Brexit." And you know what he did? He went, "Oh boy, I would have made it anyway." That's their attitude. That is exactly what he said.
And
there's a lot of city traders that made money as well off the off Brexit and other things. You know, some of these people made hundreds of millions of pounds from trading. Question is, how did they know which way to go? That's the key. That's the key issue.
They hedged on the pound. Yeah.
So I mean, this is what a couple of friends of mine in the banking industry have said anecdotally to me. To my understanding, you can make bets in banking within banks on the outcomes of stuff. Is anyone else aware of that?
I've heard something. Well, you mean hedge bets, or?
I think so. Yeah.
When you can bet on the pound falling, or
there's the guy who actually donated £100,000 to Priti Patel. He makes his money on betting against oil prices. So if he thinks the oil price is going to drop, he bets against that, or bets with it, or whatever. He puts money on that, and then when the oil price is rising, he does the same thing. So he keeps an eye on. He doesn't actually, and this is what in the video I was doing about it, I was criticizing, like, he doesn't actually produce anything, or no, I think it was on the live stream. He doesn't actually produce. He doesn't create wealth or anything. It's just about betting against things, and there's a huge market there. There's a lot of people making a huge amount of money. And Farage, it seems, and Mogg were ones who said, okay, the pound is going to drop, so we'll bet against that. I don't know how this works. Be great if we could have somebody on. Maybe we can chat with somebody who knows a bit more about this. But it's there's a lot of people making huge amounts of money, and they're not actually doing anything. They're not producing anything. And this guy donated £100,000 to Priti Patel. Why?
Yeah.
I just like to ask Steve one more question, and then we can move on to the topics of today. What we talked about your best experience. Have you ever been afraid? Because I've seen a lot of Tories have been quite aggressive towards you. Have you ever felt in danger, or?
Yeah, I've never felt in danger from the Tories, but there was a time when there was a lot of far right down there. I mean, many members of Sodom, we had one guy who was kicking because we started wearing webcams and things. I've been spat at, I've been assaulted numerous occasions, and the police are very, there have been reports made, but there has not been a single conviction. No, it's never gone much further than the report. I've been tripped up, I've had the hat taken off me and thrown, and it's from the time, I don't know if you remember, when Anna Soubry was surrounded. It was the same mob that was surrounding us day in, day out for 3 months. Now, we kept reporting it, but until something happened to an MP, nothing was actually done about it. The police let them carry on saying, yeah, it's just a bit of banter. It wasn't. People were assaulted, and it was vile, day in, day out. And they're filming, and they're saying, making various allegations, totally slander, libelous, and the most vulgar things you could ever hear. And they've got a paywall up. So the more reaction they could get, so we twigged this quite early on, the more reaction they could get, the more money they were getting into their PayPal accounts. We just turned our backs on them, totally ignored them, regardless of what they were saying, and that kind of worked.
Very Dr. King in protest method. Pretty effective as well when you just ignore them, because it makes them just look like they're completely insane.
Yes, totally.
Yeah. Good work on that. I'm sorry to hear that you got all that horrible threats thrown at you.
I'm sorry as well. And the police doing nothing about it. But also, like, the ironic thing is you're fighting for these people as well, because these people are now suffering the consequences of the cost of living crisis, and you're the one who is fighting against the costs of Brexit. And these people who are abusing you on the street now, these are the same people who are worrying whether they can heat their homes or feed their families, or their elderly parents or grandparents in care homes, and they're concerned about all these things now. And you're down there fighting for them, and they're abusing you and defending the people who are taking the money out of their pockets. I really don't. I understand they have been brainwashed by the media, by the likes of the Daily Mail and the Sun and GB News or whatever. But they still, they're fighting the wrong people, they're fighting for the wrong people as well. We have a problem with Big Maj. We lost him for a moment. Okay, we're getting you back.
Yeah, and Tommy Robinson walked through one day, and he actually grabbed one of my flags, and I just walked up to him and grabbed it back and said, "Leave our flags alone," and he just laughed. It's his mentality. But there were times down there where he actually went into the House of Lords, and you can see he's going in as a guest of some of the peers. And when I'm stood across the road protesting, and I'm watching the likes of Tommy Robinson invited into the House of Lords, it was quite disconcerting.
Yeah. I just want to read out a super chat we received from Mark R. Thanks so much, Mark R. Accuse your opponent of what you are doing. The UK heads further towards tyranny while accusing people who oppose Brexit as being enemies of the people. Thanks, Steve, and all. Yeah, I agree 100%, Mark. Thanks for that. Alex, if you like, maybe we can move on to our main topics of today. So the cost of living crisis. Do you want to say something about that, and we can get some feedback from Steve and Big Maj?
Yeah, it's disconcerting. It's pushing more people into poverty. It concerns me a lot with democracy, because if people have already voted to try and get something better or to punch the government in the nose because they weren't listening to them, and you've now got another 12 million in poverty, my concern is voting for more extremist parties. My concern is rioting. Both of these things are going to happen. Crime's already been going through the roof since the beginning of Brexit. I've had lots of arguments with people about this, but we can see crime's going through the roof. I'm concerned for children. I mean, the government's got this entire policy of like, let's make us a science hub. They haven't invested in education. That came out this week with Zahawi. He was held to account by Sophie Ridge on Sky. It was like, in 2008, we're keeping parallel with the amount of money private schools pay for students per pupil. And since 2008, it's diverged, and private school funding's gone through the roof, and it's dropped. And I feel sorry for all those kids. They're just being left behind. You know, there's 100 things they could do to change that instantly overnight to improve education for kids. And they just aren't doing it. I don't think they've got the ability to. Instead, and it's another topic Madge and I were talking about this week, this obsession they've got with talking about the good side of the British Empire. But going back to the cost of living, it's really concerning. It's like their policies don't add up. You want to turn us into a science powerhouse? Sort out our foundation. You want to sort out or start making some inroads with Brexit? Sort out our education. Your kids are your resource, if you want to look at it like that, or they're our future. And they're not. And this makes me just go, I don't think they've got a clue as to what they're doing. Like, start to finish, I think they're just totally out their depth. And then I'll finally finish on this. With universal credit, I worked out, if I set up a company as a consultant, let's say, and I was on 90K, I've worked out I could probably fiddle it so I only pay between 12 and 15%. If you're in universal credit, there's a thing that's been in the news recently called the taper rate. That's a tax on universal credit. So every pound you earn, they tax you 55% out of your universal credit. That's a tax. No one's called them out on this. Not Labour, not Lib Dems, not Greens. It, strange enough, came from my dad, who's always been a Conservative voter. And when he heard this, he was like, that's not on. Why is it a 55% tax for the poorest? But then, of course, if you're also earning an income, you're being taxed on that as well, because you'll have to pay income tax. Now, obviously, there's a discount for the first, I think, 12,500, 14,500 that you earn. But you're still taxed. And you might even have to go and reclaim that to get it back. So you've got to wait a year before you can even go near that money. So it's like, why is that the case? Why can I wangle it if I'm on a consultant and set up my own company? I pay 12%. But if you're the lowest, in the lowest bracket of earning, you're on universal credit, you're paying 55% and 20% on your earnings. It makes no sense. And it just shows they haven't got a clue what they're doing. I think, Steve, you even mentioned with the dividends, first 5,000 or 6,000 is tax-free. And then it's a 7% tax on dividends. Yeah. I assume it's just conservative fiscal policy of just wanting to support the rich and reinvestment into British companies, which is just, it's trickle-down economics, and we know it doesn't work. Anyway, that's my tirade over.
Yeah.
Big Maj, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, with the schools point, that was not them not knowing what they do. They knew exactly what they were doing when they made those cuts to schools. Now you've got classes that 30 plus kids in a classroom. You've got a massive lack of teachers. They knew exactly what they were doing with that stuff. Um, I don't think they want kids that go to state schools to go to the universities that their kids would go to. One of my the old head of the sixth form that I used to go to, she said her proudest thing was like sending kids that went to their school, the free school, putting them up next to kids that went to a private school where their families paid 10, 20K or whatever a year. She said that was her like one of her proudest things because they don't have the same resources yet. She's managed to create an environment for people to go and compete with them. Like I knew a couple of guys that did go to Oxford and they were incredibly smart, and you got to wonder like how many other kids are there that are that smart but they don't have the resources. The teaching, the one-on-one time like you would get as a private kid. So yeah, they knew exactly what they're doing with that stuff. Cuts. That's what they believe in, cuts and other things. So that's all they know. Trickle down economics. Gone.
Do you think it's a long-term thing of if they don't go to university, they're more likely to vote Conservative, and therefore it's keeping the status quo, or is it more a hierarchical system that they're trying to put in place where you don't have social mobility because you haven't had an education, you can't go up or it's harder. I should be very clear about it. It's harder to go up in the ranking in social mobility. Is that
these guys they don't play 4D chess. They're not 3-4 moves ahead of you. So the only thing they understand is cuts because they want to cut the deficit, or they don't want to spend things on free school meals, all that sort of stuff. More socialism, that kind of thing. They don't like spending money there. That's all they know. And so when it comes to a lot of things, you'll realize like things have gotten a lot worse. NHS is a lot worse because all they understand is cuts. That's it. That's all they understand. Cuts and privatization, because that's where you can make money off that. If you look at the fall of the Soviet Union, how many people made money off that? If you look at when they privatized Royal Mail in this country, the share price was lower than it should have been, and a lot of people, I think David Cameron's friends made decent money off that. It was a lot lower. I think it was 100 pence lower than it should have been. And so, these politicians, they can help insider trading out a lot. That's the thing, and that's all they understand is privatization, cuts, trickle down economics. They don't understand how things work. That's why I was very surprised when Sunak did the furlough scheme. I was genuinely shocked when he did that because in 2008, Labour didn't come out with a similar thing because if you look at the GDP, I think the 2008 crash was like 2 or 3%. It might have been less. I'd have to check. But if you look at the COVID, it was 8%. It's about 8%. So it's kind of crazy, like how differently they were dealt with because, economic philosophy has changed a bit where they believe, from before where the state had no role to play, they believe now the state actually does have a role to play within the economy, which is completely different to what they thought, 10, 15 years ago. It's kind of crazy. But I think with the Tories, the only thing they understand is cuts and privatization. That's it. They're not, trying to stop social mobility. I think they don't really care. I think they'll want to see more of their kind, in power, in Parliament and other things. But at the end of the day, that's all they'll ever care about. When it comes to universal credit, they know the damage they're doing. David Cameron would have known back then the damage he was doing because it's in reports. People would tell him, civil servants would say, "Look, this is the impact. This is what's going to happen." And the simple fact is, they've had a mantra for the last 12 years of workers and shirkers putting people who, maybe work less hours or earn less money against people who earn slightly more money. That's all they've ever known. There was a bit where George Osborne said, you work hard, you wake up every morning, and you see your neighbor who's got their curtain, they start closing their curtains and things like that. And you're like, douchebag, they could have been working a night shift. You have no idea what their circumstances are. And what they ask is people to judge each other. That's what they want. That's all they really care about at the end of the day. Cuts, trickle down economics, and that's it. Socialism doesn't work. When we've seen the NHS was a rousing success. Schools under Labour were really good.
Yeah.
And they could have been better. A lot of things we could have made better, but does the Royal Mail work any better than it did before? No.
No. Worse.
Arguably, it could be worse, because they've had other problems. It wasn't run the best anyways, but the simple fact is, it worked by using, where I kind of live in towns and cities to subsidise rural routes. So, it wouldn't make a loss. But now the Royal Mail can say, actually, do you know what? It's not worth me going to the countryside because it costs about 10 quid in petrol to go per farm or something like that. So, it's not worth it. We'll cut it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, look at the infrastructure system we have in this country. It's a joke. The trains, all this stuff, it's ridiculous. And at the end of the day, the funniest thing the government have done is when, I think it was East Coast Mainland, the people who ran it, Virgin and who's Stagecoach, took a massive dividend out and said, "Oh, we can't actually run this train line," and then the government had to step in and actually did it better.
Shock.
When the government had the RBS shares, RBS's shares went up quite a decent amount, and then he sold it cheap because he did what they don't want to prove is government control things can work. That's it.
Against our ethos, isn't it? It's small government, and it's classic liberalism, basically. Is what you call it. Classic. Like,
what they say is the private sector can run things better, when in some cases that's true, but they still want to make a 10-20% profit. So you need to find ways of doing that just in itself before anything else can happen.
It's one of the things that disturbed me with the by the looks of it, the privatization of the NHS. I've had the experience of being in the United States for quite some time, and I had friends that if you didn't work, you didn't have insurance. And I had a couple of friends whose truck flipped over, and they weren't working at that point. Ambulance turns up, and they tell the ambulance to go away because they know even for an X-ray, it'll be $1,000. And if you're not employed, what do? The ambulance turned up and insisted that they still look at them and take him to the local hospital. But you're just like, what type of system is this? Do we really want that?
The ambulance alone costs about $2,000, I think. I think it's like $2,000 for an ambulance.
$2,000 a mile or something like that.
That's crazy. Like that's just insane. And
For
like
the
people like for the ambulance, and people like the NHS doesn't make a profit. It's like neither does the police or the fire force or the fire services or the teachers, the schools. Schools don't make a profit. It's just madness. People like when you're sick, if you go to the doctors, within a few days, you can go back to work, you can function. If it takes you a week or two to get a doctor's appointment, you're out of the workforce. That's where you have a healthcare system. You can get preventative care. So if you have something like cancer, they catch it early and they can deal with it rather than going through weeks or months of chemotherapy where it puts your body under a lot of stress. That's where, the healthcare services make money. Teaching, you invest in pupils that you hope they get a better job. That's why they made education compulsory in this country. It's not because they're like, oh yeah, we need a really great country where kids can read and write and do cool things. No, they're more productive as workers. That's why you have all these systems in place. So honestly, it's just dumb. Like these people, they don't understand the economics. They believe in they still live in the Thatcher era or the Reagan era. That's the thing. And like the 80s are over, my friend. Like that's done. A lot of economists wouldn't even push these philosophies anymore because they're done. They're tried.
I just like to bring in Steve on this. Steve, what's your take on the cost of living crisis?
Oh gosh, cost of living crisis. I mean, you've got to look at where it stems from. We've had 12 years of a Tory government, and in their last manifesto, they've said they won't raise taxes, they won't raise VAT. And most of their manifesto, they have basically lied, because they've raised taxes. This new NI tax now, they've said, we're borrowing so much, interest rates are low. The interest rates are rising. So all the money they've borrowed is going to cost far more. So I've calculated on the new NI tax for the next 5 years, we are covering the 37 billion test and trace, the 4 billion write-off of fraud by Sunak on the what was it called? The furlough fraud, I call it, and the 12 billion they spent on PPE, of which 8 billion pounds worth was useless. And they're actually paying millions of pounds a week to store that. I think they've burnt some of it now and disposed of some of it. But there's interest on all of that. So for the next 5 years, your new NI tax, every single working person in the UK is covering that 50 billion. They've said it was for the NHS. The NHS aren't going to see that money. Or if they do, it'll be wangled somehow with another area of government. The cost of living now for people, £20 a week cut, which was given during the pandemic from universal credit. That made a big difference to somebody. These Tories go out and they'll blow that on a coffee. it's just ridiculous that they took that £20 a week from them, and now we're going into this energy crisis with costs, with where we locate fuel, and why did the energy companies double the stand-in charge? Yeah, I put that question out a few times, and some of the feedback I've been getting is it's because companies took on from other companies which had collapsed. So they were covering the costs in that way. But that's another tax. And those on the least are having to pay the same as those on the most. So,
Yeah, it's really regressive.
Yeah.
If you think... Sorry, go on, Max.
No, I just want to say something, and then just want to read out some super chats, and then I'll let you speak, Alex. No, just something I found shocking this week was Martin Lewis, the money saving guru. He said he's run out of tools. He can't help, and it's good that he's been brought on to Good Morning Britain to talk about these problems, because he's actually said, you know, his whole job was explaining to people how to save money. Okay, you can change this tariff, you can shop around, there's always a way. But he said this week that last week he said there's nothing left. There's nothing for people to do. So it's not like there's a way out, which is really shocking. It's not like there's, okay, if you do this, you can save money, you can get to the end of the month, or you can pay your bills. He said there's nothing, and he's an expert. He's somebody who knows what he's talking about. And he said there's nothing left. So it really needs government intervention. I'll just read some super chats and then let the rest of you speak. Freddie, thanks so much, Freddie B. My aunt is in London since she was 20, now in her 70s. She's worried that she'll have to move back to Ireland due to struggling with increased prices. I've actually spoken to a number of people who've said that they're planning on moving because they can't afford what's going on. Bowler Hatman, hey Bowler Hatman, great to have you on. Another friend of the show. The Tories are stuck in their ideology. So to them, nothing is wrong, as their ideology tells them that there should be no problems. I'd like to get you guys your feedback on that as well, the ideology behind all of this. And then we have Kathleen Anderson. Thanks so much, Kathleen. Says, I've come out as trans 10 years ago, and it's horrifying seeing my life becoming a wedge issue, seemingly to replace the "but immigrants" headline. Things have regressed so much since the 2016 referendum. Maybe we can also talk a little bit about that as well. How the hateful language, you know, it used to be immigrants. Now it's moved on to, for example, trans people or other social issues as well that are being used as wedge issues against. As I always say on the channel, it's about, you know, getting poor people to hate other poor people, for example, or to get working class people to hate other working class people, ordinary people. Sorry, Alex, I interrupted you. If you want to say, and then we can maybe we can respond to Bowler Hatman's super chat.
That was a good interruption. Yeah, I was just going to say, just on one last bit. If you miss a universal credit meeting, there is an entire department galvanized and created to make sure that you're chased up on that and you're fined. Yet Sunak wiped off 4 billion on PPE. I mean, the list goes on. There's PPE. I think Phil from A Different Bias brought this up. He said there was 30 billion in tax that wasn't collected from import tax in the first half of the year. So you're going, that's huge. Then you got PPE. Then you got furlough. Then you've got track and trace, which is the biggest joke ever. There's not only was that 37 billion wasted, their argument was that, you know, they had to develop it quickly. It's like, no. You could have had that developed when they developed the game Snake, which I think all of us remember from way back in when. So they've had all that time to have some of their stuff pre-prepped, and it wouldn't have cost as much, and yet it still didn't work. And we've all, I think, given up on track and trace. But it's just funny that you hit people the hardest, who are the poorest, and you punish them the most. But it's almost like they can't deal, or they don't want to deal with the fraud that's obviously taken place, which is in the billions. It's just typical. It just reminds me of the 2008 crash in the bankers, who clearly just made an absolute hash of it. And it's, white collar crime, so no investigation can be done. It's like they can't wrap their heads around it. Anyway, that was
just to respond to that, and then maybe we'll bring in Steve. Just when you said about the bankers, I remember I think it was in 2007, 2008. I remember reading a story about a bank called Allied Irish Bank in Ireland that I think it collapsed completely. But the company, the bank laid off all the staff. They went home. Many of them, I think they went home with nothing, and they had mortgages and bills to pay. And the president of the bank was given, to go home. He was given €3 million. It's like you've destroyed the company. Here's €3 million to go away. It's like, wow, okay. It's operating at a completely different level.
Iceland, I think, arrested their bankers, and we should have done that.
Yeah, would have sent a strong message not to do it again. It's as simple as that. But that you were talking about ideology, Max. That's one of their ideologies. They don't punish the rich crooks. Just let them go and do it again, because that's how capitalism works. They're
hierarchical for the rich.
Classical liberal.
It's socialism for the rich, isn't it? Where was all this Thatcher rhetoric of, well, sink or swim? Fair enough, the banks they did need to be bailed out. Otherwise, you're asking for a Great Depression type scenario. But at the end of the day, sink or swim. You make it or you don't. What's going on with that?
Yeah, it's nanny state, isn't it, for the rich, and then nothing for the rest, which is just it's not shocking, but it should be. What are your thoughts, Steve?
Steve, yeah.
I was going to say, on the banks, they were bailed out, but now they are making very, very good profits. Had they not been bailed out, they wouldn't be making the money they are making now. So there should be more of a tax on the banks in reflection that it was our money that kept them. Obviously, if the banks had collapsed, we'd have all been in deep crap. But ultimately, our money kept them going to make the profits they are making today, our taxes. And they should be paying a far higher tax. I realise that if we tax bankers more here, they just up sticks and go abroad, which is a problem in the world generally. Companies should not just be able to up sticks, move an office and pay like 10% tax or, so it's almost like bribing companies to stay here.
Yeah.
The taxes, but
I'm a big proponent of the cooperative system that's been set up in the Basque Country in Spain called Mondragoon. And essentially you vote in your CEO, your chairman, and your board of directors on a yearly basis. But it also means that any big decisions can't be made without all the workers who have ownership and share of the company. But that then stops anyone from tootling off abroad, because you can't shift an entire company if everyone's got a share of it. So I've been a big proponent of that being set up. But again, government isn't interested or doesn't have the brains to come up with stuff like that. Mondragoon is I think, the 5th biggest company in Spain. It's the biggest company in the Basque Country. And there's all sorts of bonuses to it. There's a low level of poverty in the area as a result. It's existed for about 75 years. Ownership of the company makes everyone happy. You can't, and the CEO can't get more than 10 times the amount the lowest paid in some and 5 times in others, because it's a cooperative, but they're separate companies. So they have their own hospitals, they have their own schools, they have their own banks, they have their own businesses, which I think originally started off as fridges. I think that was how they started, and then they've moved into other areas as well. And you can only have 500 employees per company. It just means you can't do half this stuff. But our economy's not geared for that. Our economy is based around banking. That's where we historically have made everything. That's why I think the fintech stuff's going on. Because all the banks are going, yeah, this is good. They probably don't understand what the tech is. But they're going, this can make money because it's financial. And, I think that's why the fintech stuff is ever growing. What are your thoughts, Max?
No, I'm familiar, not as familiar as yourself with those cooperative, but yeah, if you have people who are working, if you're working in a company and you're benefiting in the profits of that company, then you're more likely to remain in the company. You're more likely to dedicate more time to the company. But if you feel like a number, or if you feel like a small cog in a massive machine, you're not going to feel valued, and you're not going to put in the effort. And as you said, it's developing. It has been shown to be a success. The work environments are more protective to the workers. The community is better off. The level of poverty is lower, and I like the idea that you don't have the CEO owning a private yacht while somebody is struggling, and this whole idea. That you have workers you have people working and on universal credit. Of course, that's not what's happening in the Basque Country, but the idea that people are working and on welfare. The whole idea of welfare was that it would be a social safety net, that if you lost your job, you could go there, it would protect you until you got a job again. But the idea that you have people who are on universal credit, people who are working and going to food banks, and how the average voter is looking at that and saying, yeah, but Boris is doing his best. How people can look at that and say, yeah, I'm going to vote for the Tories next time because, and it just brings us on to our next issue. I just want to touch on it from the super chat. Like, yeah, we need to vote for the Conservatives because of wokeness, and because they want to enforce things on us, and they want to change our bathrooms, and I just want to respond to maybe Kaylee's super chat, the idea that the Tories are bringing in all of these wage issues to try and convince ordinary people to vote against their interests. What's your take on that, guys? Maybe Big Maj, if you want to go first, and then we can ask Steve and Alex.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty apparent, isn't it? To be honest, they're always looking for someone to attack. It's the culture war, and the culture war is always raging on. Steve's been a victim of that. To be fair, with those far right goons, and there'll be a lot more people, I think, that are going to realise how bad it is. They're asking MPs. MPs don't even know what day it is most of the time. I'm sure. It's the people who set them up for interviews. Tell them, all right, it's Tuesday today. You're on this program. Blah, sweet. Okay, it's Tuesday. Nice. But yeah, they've asked like Keir Starmer, they've asked like Rayner, they've asked other MPs. I mean, it is quite sad when you see Johnson apparently starting off his the big party thing with a trans joke when one of the MPs just come out as trans recently. But yeah, they are looking for someone to attack. They can't really do it to gay people anymore because people are like, actually, gay people are right. We don't really care. Like, if they want to be gay, then fine. I think there was a Family Guy joke where it's like, if gay people want to be miserable like the rest of the married people, then let them be it. And that's actually a good way of putting it, I guess, in a way. But yeah, it's just they are desperately looking for an issue. In America, they use it a lot, to be honest. Probably where they got the idea from of trans people, bathrooms, and all this stuff. I don't know. I don't know what they're going to say because the sports thing's been raging on for a while, as well. Trans people in sports, that's come up recently this year, and I think that's what's kind of sparked this one off. It's not necessarily one they were trying to find. I think it kind of not found itself, but it's been bubbling away for a while, I think, and no one's had like a good answer on it. I think that's the key problem. But the Tories are happy to weaponize it because that's who they are. It's a big way for them to steer the conversation away from, the cost of living. Because at the end of the day, people they should be more concerned about how much bills and things cost like that, but they're more obsessed with the culture, or at least some people are. And that's where the Tories do well. They know how to weaponize minorities. It's what they've been best at, to be honest. That and robbing people.
Steve, do you want to reply to that, or something to say on that?
I see a lot of it as deliberate distraction created by the government. Divide and rule. It works every time, and this is what the government are doing. They'll pick on minority groups to stir up, a fester online, and it distracts from actually what this government is doing. It's the government now has created. I've never known a government like this. I don't think any of us have, but they have created so many issues that we are actually struggling to keep up. We can't protest them fast enough before something else comes out, and then you know, it becomes forgotten. Come an election, they'll throw a few crumbs, and people have forgotten all the issues that we've fought about. And you know, you can, with Brexit, you can go back further than the Russia report, even. You know, for years people hadn't seen that Russia report, and when it comes out, then there's a distraction created. It'd be Partygate. It'd be something else. So things are getting lost. And somehow, come maybe May, local elections, everything needs to be brought to the fore so people can see really what these Conservatives have done. This is not the Conservative Party of yesterday. This is a mix of UKIP and Conservative, which has become nationalist, which is heading towards far right and taking the UK very close to the path of fascism. Too close for comfort for me. And yeah, my grandfather would be turning in his grave.
Prejudice. It's just prejudice. There's no place for prejudice at all, and yet that's what's happened. I mean, I go to the Olympics. Going back to the Olympics, like that actually was a day that I felt really proud of Britain. It felt progressive and forward-thinking and inclusive in taking everyone on board and looking back at the history in a. I mean, history, again, Madge and I were talking about that. Like, stuff we're taught at school was all essentially whitewashed as nice. But, yeah, there's no place for prejudice. Why can't we just all sit around at the table and get on with each other? And it's, as you said, deliberately creating division. Except, which I find really interesting, I've been recently studying about Bismarck and how he unified Germany. And he's got similar problems to what we have now. We've got a split country. And Putin's provided the perfect enemy. You could literally just use him as like a focal point for the country to come together. And instead the Conservatives just keep going off on one and dividing the country. And yet the thing that we actually need is unification. And you've literally got that perfect thing. Bismarck did it with the French. He used the French to galvanize southern Germany, or the southern German states, to come and join the German Empire. That's what he used them for. And it worked. And he had a quick victory against the French. And we don't have someone like that with brains. Like, we don't have someone who we desperately need to come in and fix these problems by thinking outside the box. But and instead of like this division internally, we could have this unification and look at external problems and say, look, we've got climate change, we've got to unify on that. We've got Russia, we need to unify on that. And yeah, it's divide and conquer.
I think it was I think it was Johnson himself who was on in an interview, or he was on I don't remember where it was, but he said, yeah, the way I operate is I issue loads of gaffes and it distracts people, and people are focusing on one gaffe, and I think the Tories are using a similar sort of method where just keep pumping out new issues for people to focus on, and then they won't focus on the one before. So you know, it's and I think that's what they're trying to do, is create these wedge issues where the culture wars, because because you can't use the argument of, well, we want to stop migrants coming in because we need them. Brexit has been a disaster. We need these people, so we can't continue to use that one, although some of them are still doing it. But you need to convince people who are you have to convince people who are deciding between cooking and heating their home, not heating their homes and eating. You have to convince them that there's something more important, like a statue or the name of a building or a flag or something like that. And how they do it is almost you almost have to look at it in awe. You have to almost respect it. The ability to convince people to focus on something that's not important, that doesn't affect them directly, and not focus on something that is affecting them directly.
They still could have done that with Russia. They could have still had that as a defocus point. But of course, we all know where they've been getting funding from. So that's never going to happen. And, you know, we could see that they're absolutely paranoid about that being brought up. I think, Steve, you said, like, I can't remember if it was just off camera or during this, but you said you've been bringing that up with them, and then they attack you instead.
Yeah.
which is like, the best defense is offense, as you say.
Yeah. Well, they come at me with deflection. I'm asking them about one of the questions last week was about Russian money, Partygate, and basically cost of living. And they tried to turn it on me by saying, well, who funds you? Where are you getting your money from? And I'm telling them, I'm not the elected representative. I'm not the one paid to sort out the country. And deflection and abuse is the way the Tories have tried to turn this on me. And for me, it actually works better. All the good Tories have been kicked out of the party. And it's not going to get any better. And unless we stand up and actually do something about it, we're fucked.
Can I just thanks for that that frankness. Good. Before we move on to the next topic of the May elections, I just want to read out a super chat from MF. Thanks so much, MF. How can the message of unite be spread? Can YouTube channels cooperate more to increase research, increase reach? Sorry, time is running out. Oppression is growing fast. I think even things like this, we're meeting on a Sunday together, we're discussing things, we're getting people on. I think this is also a good way for us to get the message out. But yeah, the individuals on their own will have an impact, but it needs to be united. And I've been speaking to Phil from in the past as well about how, and others about how the Labour Party in particular need some sort of not just a ground movement, but they also need some online movement. And I don't know who, maybe it was Alex, I was speaking to you about it, how the Labour Party I think it was Momentum, have something like 11,000 subscribers, and the last video they put out had 10,000 views or something like that. But this is, a movement within the biggest party in Britain, like the biggest party as in numbers of members, as far as I know. This isn't, they need to do something. So maybe I'd just like to go on to the elections. Does anyone have any predictions for the May elections? Maybe also including Northern Ireland, if anyone wants to take a stab at that. Alex, do you want to go first?
Total silence.
It's local elections, come on, man. Like it's like, you can make predictions about it. It's really tough to actually figure out. So, I saw the Conservatives are confident apparently of taking over Sunderland. I'm just like, have you guys just not had enough of the Tories in Sunderland? Like, how have you benefited from them? Like, what the hell, guys? But go for it, mate.
Wow. What do you think?
Well, May elections, look, if you can't get out and protest, get out and campaign against the Conservatives. You don't actually have to campaign for any particular party if you don't want to. Just campaign solely against the Conservatives. The Tories say vote for us on our track record and our achievements. Got any? You need to convince Tory voters that they've been mugs, because that's what they are. That's how I feel. But how people can accept now what the Tories are doing, despite everything that's going on, the financial costs, the taxes, the way our economy is kind of in collapse. People need to wake up, and we need to get these Tories out. And then again, back to voting. First past the post. As far as I'm aware, only Belarus and the United Kingdom use that system in Europe. It's archaic, it's dated, and in the 21st century, it is not serving any of us. Less than 45% of people actually voted for Tories. So 55% of the vote went in the bin.
What have you gone against Belarus? It's a wonderful modern democracy.
Okay.
Okay.
We're heading into Russia territory.
Someone's going to clip that. I hope someone clips that. What's your problem with Belarus? I want to clip that.
I may get a call from somebody.
Lukashenko's like, thank you, Comrade Max.
We have a super chat from Sean. Thanks so much, Sean. Legally, how did the Tories get away with telling pure lies, especially about Brexit? Before we get to that super chat, maybe Alex, do you want to say something about the May elections?
I've never seen a government make so many mistakes in so many key policy areas repeatedly, and it still feels like Teflon. So I'm surprised that Sunderland might switch. I mean, you know, that's part of the Red Wall. That's the things that happen in Afghanistan, the failure there. That's one of our major recruiting areas. And yet, it's going to be interesting to see what happens. Because I think there's a lot of voters in the older generation that don't know who to vote for. And I think they're very confused by their options. They probably aren't going to vote Green. So that leaves Labour and the Conservatives. And I think they're mixed on where they stand. You know, Labour's associated with the woke movement. Can they deal with that? But then the Conservatives have hashed up the economy, not invested in the North, and they've messed up in Afghanistan. That's probably one of the biggest military failures I've ever seen on so many levels. And if that's your recruitment hotspot, I would assume people up there are going to be not voting for you just because of that. But it's almost biggest economic crash in the history of capitalism. In 300 years, in the history of capitalism, the worst economic crash. The death rate from COVID, the policy of herd immunity that they launched, I mean, that in itself is like you want to infect your country with a disease that you don't understand yet. I mean, what on earth are you thinking? Who's giving you that advice? And then you've got all sorts of other issues and scandals. I'm hoping they're going to get more of a kicking than they realise and more than the polls are showing. And one of the most interesting things I find is question time. They are laughed at. The Conservative Party are laughed at. They are mocked. They are booed. And they are with Tory voters, or at least that's what Question Time claims. And I've always felt they've been quite good at picking key people. But I think the older generation is struggling. What we need is the youth vote coming. That'll be the big turning point. And it's a question of whether or not people are going to care about the May elections. The other interesting thing is in the last set of elections for the council, I know that the Green Party had the biggest growth. So that's interesting. And that'll be interesting to see if that happens again, because that wasn't reported in the news. It was all sort of focused around the Conservatives and the Labour. And that was quite mixed as well. Seemed to be people voting in the party that seemed to be in power already to keep stability. So, you know, generally the mayoral elections were Labour orientated, but the local council elections were Conservative orientated. So again, there's quite a mix here. I'm hoping it's going to be a bit of a kicking for the Conservatives, and I think people are going to be a bit more surprised. And a major thing will depend on the youth vote coming out.
I just want to say, when you said about Sunderland, I was thinking how the government have pumped a lot of money into Nissan to keep them there, and I think that could be I don't know, but that could be a reason why people may be willing to. They think, oh look, the Tories have saved Nissan, so we're gonna vote for them for that. But I don't know if that's a legitimate prediction. But I really hope that the Labour Party. So something, as you were speaking, something was going around in my mind. The idea that, imagine if the Labour Party was in power now, and there was this cost of living crisis. What would the Tories be doing? They would be banging on about this every single day. They would be talking about how the Labour Party have abandoned the people, have abandoned businesses, abandoned everyone. They've thrown everyone under a bus. Why aren't they doing something? And instead you hear from the Labour Party, you hear almost nothing. It's like, yeah. We need to impose we need to come up with a windfall tax. Okay, that's going to pay for it. But you don't hear rhetoric. You hear a few possible solutions, but you don't hear really strong rhetoric. And that's what the Labour Party need to be doing. They need to be banging a drum saying the cost of living is the Tories. The Tories is the cost of living. The reason you can't pay your bills is because of Boris Johnson and the Tories. They need to come out with something. And I think they're taking it too mildly. I don't know, is it strategic? Is it just they're not sure what they're doing? And then I know you want to jump in. Just one thing is because in Northern Ireland there's a different situation. They're having the assembly elections, which is also going to be very interesting to watch, and it's likely that Sinn Féin could become the biggest party there, and that will completely rock the boat. Sorry, I'll let you jump in, Alex. You wanted to say something?
I get the feeling that a lot of people want stability, and they're quite keen to just continue the status quo because they don't want to rock the boat with a big change. And Hancock came out and said it and was like, oh, we don't want to change the Prime Minister during wartime. And it's like, what do you think Neville Chamberlain had? What happened to him? He got kicked out after a few months because he was totally crap. And everyone went, enough's enough. You're not up for the job. And they put someone else in. So I don't get this, like, how you can say that. I mean, he needs to go. He has just completely wrecked everything that he's touched as Prime Minister. And I've never seen in history a more incompetent and corrupt government in Britain. And that's saying, and probably even parts of the world, I've never seen this level of corruption, where foreign powers come in and just finance the people that they want in power.
We have another few super chats. I just want to read them out quickly before we finish for today. Freckle Pony, thank you so much for that. I feel we also have to address the voters in this and hold them responsible for continually giving the Tories every and any excuse under the sun. Yeah, I think that there's a general idea we shouldn't criticize the voters, but at what stage, if somebody, some of you probably know about James O'Brien's mantra of contempt for the con men, concern for the conned, is it, or compassion for the conned? I think that has its limits, though. And then we have another one from Lord Lloyd. Thanks so much for that super chat. Shirley Johnson's long history with oligarchs opens him up on the issue that has people angry. At the moment, many think he's Churchill holding Ukraine together alongside Zelensky. Just before we finish for today, I just wanted to get you guys' opinion on what's happening with Ukraine. The tide seems to be turning. A lot of Ukrainian cities have been liberated. A lot of the imagery that has come out following that is extremely distressing. We're seeing, of course, it's difficult to know exactly what's happening on the ground because there's Russian censorship, of course, but there's also Ukrainian censorship, which is, I don't want to get too much into that, but we also have another super chat. Cthulhu Max, when will the names of the fined party people become public? Just to answer that quickly, there's no obligation on them the police to release names. I think that's correct. So we may never know who they are unless they come forward themselves and say, yes, I received a fixed penalty. But I don't. Does anyone have anything else on that?
If any MPs claim 50 quid on expenses, then they were there. So keep an eye out for that one.
I want to know why it's a £50 fine when it's been £200 fines and £10,000 for organisers elsewhere.
£800, I think I've seen.
It should be like in Switzerland. It's linked to your income. So
they'll definitely claim that on expenses. They'll be like, "Oh, I've been taxed by the police. The Met Police have taxed me. I demand compensation. It was a work event."
I actually had a fine on the 24th of December 2020. I was outside the gates of Downing Street. I asked everyone else not to come because of COVID, so I was there on my own protesting. And I was given a £200 fine. I just said to the police, all right, I've got it now, I'll just carry on. They said, no, in 5 minutes, we're going to give you a £400 fine. And then if you're still here in an hour, it'll be up to a £1,000 fine. So that the police effectively shut down a single person protest. I arrived in my car. I was following the COVID regulations. Although we were in tier 4, we still had a right to protest. And I just ignored the fine, didn't pay it, nothing. And 3 months later, I get a warning saying I'm going to be arrested, blah, 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 not responding to the fine, not paying it. And then Just 2 months ago, I get a letter saying, yeah, they've written it off, they've looked at it again, and I've never replied or said anything.
I
So,
do. I do wonder how many people are going to try and claim the money back for the fine, because there's a couple of stories about that where people have said like, "Oh yeah, like how's it fair? The government got away with this stuff, and I got fined, whatever, £800 or whatever." You've seen more and more stories like that, so I do wonder how many people try and claim it or something.
Can we just go back to Ukraine for a moment? What's anyone have any comments on that? What's happening?
Seems like Russia ran out of steam. That's what it seems like. They
uh,
thought it'd be a quick operation, didn't prepare for it, and it genuinely looks like you've seen like stories because it's hard to verify anything. They're running out of tanks. It genuinely felt like I think it feels like they thought it was like when Germany invaded Poland during the was it 1939? I'm gonna say they thought they would go in there blitzkrieg, just take city after city, and they'd be welcomed in, and then they were getting attacked by Ukrainian soldiers, shouted at by old ladies. They were just it was just yeah they thought it was a quick operation, didn't prepare for it, and at the end of the day, they've run out of steam. They invested a lot in trying to take Kiev, failed. They've taken the southern areas, but they blew the shit out of those areas. Like they had to scorch earth everything, genuinely scorched earth it, and like even if they do try and take these areas through talks, what's there left for them? Rebuilding these areas will cost Russia a lot of money, which they do not have. So yeah, it's cost them a lot, and I think they're running out of steam. You're talking about brain drain in Russia as well. A lot of academics and people leaving, and those people won't come back. I think they'll set up home somewhere else. They won't come back. Maybe Privatization will give them visas. Who knows? But they are foreign, but they are Russian. So it's a bit of a trade-off for her. But yeah, I think I said to someone the other day, I thought the war was going to end this month, and she was like, "What, today, 31st of March?" I was like, "Oh no, I thought it was April. My bad." So I think it's gonna. She got me there. It's quite funny. Well, she's like today, and I was like, "What? What are you talking about?" But no, I can
At
because
12
they're having
o'clock.
talks in Turkey at the moment. Yeah, they're having talks in Turkey at the moment, so I think this will end this month. It just depends on what Russia's demands are. Will they take Donbass and Luhansk or something? I can't remember the name of the other area. Or they put a claim on Crimea and say we want to formally take Crimea into the Russian Federation, and I think Mariupol, the ports areas, would they try and take those? Because I think the Ukraine saying no to that definitely. It just depends on what the demands are now in talks. It's interesting. It's going on in Turkey, a NATO member, but definitely not going to talk to anyone in Belarus. That's for sure. That's where Putin wanted it originally. But we'll see what happens with that. These guys they've run out of steam, so there's not much left in the tank. Somehow Ukrainians have managed to hold on. I genuinely don't know how they managed to do that. But yeah,
yeah,
Steve?
I mean, yeah, I mean, seeing the scenes in Bucha yesterday online, the road, just dead bodies everywhere. Um, Absolutely, war crimes have gone on, but there's no way Putin will ever be held to account for that. He'll never see a day in The Hague.
Yeah.
But equally, what's worrying me slightly is now the Russians have pulled out of those areas. It's more open to strategic bombing, missiles, a bit more air power over. You know, they may try and soften it up and go back in. Nobody knows what is going through Putin's mind. The man is an absolute mad butcher. You know, there are no other words for him.
Yeah, yeah. I think there is a real concern that he will regroup and then try and go in again. On the one side, I think it'd be probably a year from now because he needs to rebuild his military and ironically a lot of the parts for the tanks are actually produced in Ukraine, so that's a big problem for him. But on the other side, if as soon as the Russians do pull out, you're going to see a Ukrainian military rebuilt completely from the ground up, and they're going to see access to more modern weaponry, and I think we're going to see some sort of new iron curtain between Russia and Ukraine. Where it will fall, I don't know, because I think Putin perhaps is hoping to have some sort of corridor to the sea, and Ukraine, Crimea and the Donbass region is part of that plan, I think. But we'll have to wait and see. I think we'll just have another minute or two. So, Alex, do you want to say something about that, and then we can finish for today?
So one of the key principles of Blitzkrieg, and to be honest, any war doctrine, is don't hit the strong points. Kiev's a strong point. So the best thing to do is then go around that. And yeah, I think maybe he'll pull out, go long range, and then circumvent to where he's having more success, push those troops in from the east, and probably try and, maybe there'll be a goal of splitting the country in half, maybe there'll be a goal of shutting off everything from the water. The Russian Revolution in under Lenin, not going to quote the date, but the year, but that was 1917. Part of the cause of that was because the Russian economy was being hit because it didn't have access to warm water in Europe. And he's obviously secured that by having the Crimea. In fact, I think the Crimean War of 1870 was in part because of all of that. So it's historically this area that they've had a lot of turbulence and problems with, which is why they're probably going to the coast. And it'll be interesting to see if they go for Odessa next. I think one of the key things is going to be how much success he has of that. The war casualties as well. It's not looking good on the home front, because why are all these troops dying if the Ukrainians are meant to love us? And I still go back to the hacking. That's not going to stop until he's out of power. And I think that's going to cause him more problems than I think a lot of the mainstream media is giving it credit. You're seeing some interviews with anonymous hackers, but they're not. I don't think they'll ever stop. I think they'll continue to hack into the Russian system and release data. They just released central bank data. One of the pieces of information from that, I think 1.6 trillion have gone through Cyprus, and then out into and obviously once it's in Cyprus, it can go into the rest of Europe. So lots of things are starting to come up into the forefront about how the Russian operations systems are working. FBS have been hacked. So I think that's going to cause him more problems than anything else. And I don't think there's any solution to it. It's a form of guerrilla warfare that's brand new. It's online, and it's very hard to hit back at because it's individuals that he's got to hit. He knocks out a computer in someone's house. Well, they just get rid of it, buy a new one, or wipe it and start up again. How do you fight that? I don't know. And I think even China's probably going to be quite intimidated by the damage that's being caused by hackers all over the world, because you cannot go and whack them, you can't nuke them, you can't destroy their stuff because it costs so little now to get a new computer up and running. So I think that's going to be the long-term problem that Putin has. I've got nothing else to say.
It's kind of crazy how Russia, used cyber hacking so much. If you look at what they did for DNC, absolutely decimated them when they, hit John Podesta with a phishing scam, and they managed to get loads of emails on his risotto recipe, which apparently isn't that great. Max, I'm sure there'd be many people in your neighbouring area would be like, no, that's not risotto, mate, get out of it. But, you'd think like over the last decade, they would have realised how dangerous cyber warfare is, considering they're pretty good at it. So you think like Putin was like, all right, lads, we might get hacked, yeah, just sort out your passwords and stuff, make sure you don't fall for any phishing scams, like click this link if you haven't refreshed your password in the last 30 days or something. And it's just wild how he didn't realise, oh yeah, people can try and hack us.
Yeah,
like it's just crazy.
Especially
after all the damage, like he was the one. Hillary Clinton was her own worst enemy in 2016, but those emails were so damaging. And you think Putin would be like, all right, yeah, let's tighten up our internet and all this stuff, our accounts and stuff, and no, like some philanthropy group essentially just hacked the Russian central bank. Like that's crazy. Like that's absolutely insane. Like the central bank was hacked by a bunch of people we know nothing about.
Yeah, and that's it. I don't see how you could defend against it. I don't. I've stated how he continued to do it, and what's he going to do? Like shut down everyone's internet across the world?
Don't tempt him. Don't say that. I need the internet.
No, don't say
that. Don't say that. We need the internet.
So, guys, I want to say a massive thank you to Steve and Big Mash for coming on today. It'd be great to have you guys back if you can.
Yeah.
Great discussion today. Thanks so much. We'll see you hopefully again in the future. Guys, remember to smash the like button on the way out if you haven't already. And we'll see you next Sunday for our next Sunday brunch with with some new guests. Okay, thanks a lot, and to my co-host, of course, Political X. Thanks for doing a wonderful job today, and the moderators for keeping everything on the stream going well.
Thank you, Max.
Thank you. Thanks, you guys, and I'll see you all. See you soon. Okay.